What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Super Beast GN, and today we're going to be talking about everything Ward. If you don't know what Ward is, if you're new to the game, we're going to teach you about it today. If you're a veteran player and you already know all this video is not for you. I don't want the comments going, I already know all this. It's like, that's fine. That's not for you. It's for people who don't know. That's who's trying to help. But if you are a player that's been playing for a little while, you might want to stick around because you might learn a few things about Ward that you didn't know before. Or you might already know it, whatever. But let's talk about Ward. Ward says whenever a permanent with Ward becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays the Ward cost. Ward is a triggered ability. So when you target the Toadstool Admirer here, who has Ward 2, let's say with the Go for the Throat, the Ward will trigger, and then you'll be prompted to pay an extra 2. So you would have to pay 4 mana, 2 for the Go for the Throat, and 2 for the Ward to actually kill the Toadstool Admirer, which makes Toadstool Admirer a pretty great 1-drop. It's one of my favorites. But what happens? What happens when we attach something like Sheltered by Ghosts to the Toadstool Admirer? Well, now we have 2 instances of Ward 2. So now you would have to pay Ward 2, and then another Ward 2 for the Sheltered by a Ghost. It stacks. Unlike Hexproof, which doesn't stack, it's just all Hexproof. So 2 instances of Ward 2 are not redundant. So let's say you put the Sheltered by Ghost on the Armored Armadillo, which is definitely not a Mega Man X boss. Or is it? It is. So the card would say Ward 2, Ward 1. You would have to pay Ward 2, you had to pay 2 extra, and then you would have to pay 1 extra for the other Ward. So technically it's Ward 3, but it is 2 separate instances of Ward. So it's 2 different triggered abilities. Now, a problem that people run into, like I said, if you enchant the Armadillo, you get Ward 2 and then it will comma Ward 1, or vice versa. I don't know how it works. But if you put this on the Toadstool Admirer, it's going to say Ward 2 and then in parentheses times 2, which I think is, as of the recording of this video, which I think is confusing to some people because I've had this happen. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is that people will target like the Toadstool Admirer with removal when it has the Sheltered by Ghosts on it, and it'll say Ward 2 times 2, but the opponent won't have enough. And I guess sometimes maybe they're just doing it just to do it because they know that there's nothing else they can do, and then they have the game lost anyways. Or just some people just don't understand how the Ward works. And I think it's worded very wrong. I think it should be Ward 2, Ward 2, like just pile it on, man, because it's very confusing when you see Ward 2 once and then oh, okay, Ward 2. I only got to pay the 2, but you don't see the times 2, which is kind of confusing. Because like I said, with Ward 1, it'll say Ward 1, Ward 2, and that's kind of easy to understand. You just see, oh, it's Ward 1, Ward 2, but it does stack, so you do have to pay a total of 3 or 4, depending on the situation. So just remember that the wards do stack. So the more ward is on your creature, the more your opponent will have to pay, which is very important because you don't want to find yourself without the mana to pay the ward. Now, here's an interesting interaction that I've dealt with, but you probably shouldn't deal with this a lot. I've had somebody target my Toadstool Admirer, right? And the ward triggers, and then they played Nowhere to Run. And what Nowhere to Run does, if you don't know, it says that creatures your opponents control can be the targets of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. Ward abilities of those creatures don't trigger. So it does not take ward away from the creature. It just doesn't trigger the ability. But if you target a creature with ward and the ability triggers, Nowhere to Run doesn't stop that trigger because it is already triggered. So just be aware of that. If you Nowhere to Run after the ward has been triggered, it doesn't stop that ward. It will stop hexproof though, because of the wording of the card. It says they can be targets of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof, and then it says ward abilities of those creatures don't trigger. But if it's already triggered, this will do nothing about that. So I wanted to explain that just because I have had that interaction, oddly enough, but it's not a common interaction because most people will just play the Nowhere to Run first because it's honestly much safer that way anyways. So that's the way I would do it. Another cool thing about Ward is, like I said before, it is a triggered ability. So interactions with Roaming Throne actually make it quite interesting. So what the Roaming Throne does, it has itself Ward 2. As this creature enters, choose a creature type. This creature is the chosen type in addition to its other type, so this becomes the type you choose. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. So what that means is if you play the Golem, if you play the Roaming Throne, and you choose Oof, or Oaf, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but you know what it is. Ward will now trigger twice on the Toadstool Admirer. So now it'll be Ward 2, and then it will another instance of Ward 2. And this is why the wording on the Roaming Throne says if the triggered ability of another creature you control, because they don't want the Ward 2 triggering twice. However, they could have just made it Ward 1, which would be interesting, and then not have that text. But yeah, so I think it's just in case like you want to give it like Sheltered by Ghosts or something, and then like now that's like Ward 2, Ward 2, Ward 2, Ward 2. That's like 4 times Ward 2. It just makes it interesting. So that's a cool interaction. I've not really seen anyone do like a lot with this, but like yes, the ward is a triggered ability, so you can double the triggered ability of the Oof. You can also do it with I believe Delny too. Can Delny do it? Let me I didn't plan this one, but let's see Delny. Let's see what Delny does, what the wording is on it. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers the second time. So as long as the Toadstool Admirer is power 2 or less, even with the Delny will trigger, or the ward will trigger twice on the Toadstool Admirer and the Armadillo. Interesting to note, though, also on the Armadillo is that you can power it up with its own ability, so you can get +X, +O, and you know, you can always do that after the ward has been triggered. With the Delny, oh, ward triggers twice, okay. They have to pay it twice, and then you can, like, it's like if you're trying to do like cut down, they can cut it down, and then you can power it up after the ward's triggered twice, and then you make them spend 2 mana, and then you also have a Armadillo that's not dead, so you can do that too. That's a thing you can do. Just putting that out there. Yeah, that one I didn't put that one into the video like ahead of time, but like I just remembered Delny because Delny's a good card. So ward is a pretty fun mechanic. I highly like it. I think it's great, and a lot of times I think it's more interesting than hexproof. I think it's interesting because you can do a lot of different things with it. I actually like that they are printing more ward than hexproof. I think hexproof probably too powerful. Ward is like a little more fair and a little more balanced, and it can be. It can be broken just like anything else. But I think ward is a fun mechanic and a very interesting and well balanced mechanic in my opinion. Now let's talk about effects that target multiple targets, like this town. This town ain't big enough is the actual card. So it says this spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a permanent you control. Return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. Sorry, can't speak today. Okay, so what happens when you target something with ward and something without ward? Well, you would still have to pay the ward, obviously. So if you have enough to pay the ward, let's say you targeted your Delny and their Roaming Throne, you would have to pay the ward for the Roaming Throne, and then you would send them both back to their owner's hands. Now, let's say you didn't have enough. Let's say you thought you had enough, you targeted the Roaming Throne, you targeted the Delny. You shouldn't do this, but let's say you thought you had enough to pay the ward to, and you target them, and then it tells you, hey, can you pay the ward? And now you don't have enough. What happens? Well, nothing would happen. The spell would fizzle. Because of the wording on ward, it says whenever a permanent with ward becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays the ward cost. So if you do not pay the ward cost, it will counter the spell, meaning it's just not going to work. When a spell is countered, it just goes to the graveyard, unless otherwise stated. So be wary of multiple targets, because that is a thing that I've seen people do as well. Some people could fall into this trap, so of doing that. So just don't try to be cheeky, don't try to be smart, don't try to be like I'll just target that because why not, right? Don't do it. It says stuff like this usually says return up to 2 targets, so you don't have to choose 2. So just be smart about it. Be wary of the interaction of ward. It is a counter. It's not like it's just like, oh, it just doesn't hurt it. It just doesn't target it. It doesn't, do anything. It counters the spell. So just be wary of that. That is a thing that can happen. I've seen it happen. And like I said, I don't know why it happens. Like if people are just being cheeky about it, or if they're, if they just don't know. But that's why I wanted to make a video like this, because I just feel like It should be out there. If this helps one person, I've done my job. Not that anyone asked me to do this, but I felt like doing it. I want to see more people play well, because people playing well makes the other person that's playing against them play well, and I think that makes like a better game, you know. So that's why, you know, I want to see everybody thrive in this game. You know, it's a fun game, and I want, like, you know, like people. I don't want to see people turn away from the game because they thought that some BS was happening, you know, and it's easy to do where it's like, wait, I thought that, you know, like I was going to kill that, but it didn't, you know. Oh, well, I'm done playing this game, you know. I want people to understand so that they don't like get frustrated, you know. And it is frustrating sometimes. I understand the game can be very frustrating, but you know, that's why I'm here trying to help you out. Now let's talk about spells that can't be countered. And now they've started putting this on these cards where it's the spell can't be countered. This includes by the ward ability. So I've seen some people do this as well. Do not fall into this category, please. This is why I'm here trying to help you. This spell can't be countered. So let's say you had a long goodbye and you wanted to target the Toadstool Admirer, which will kill it because Planeswalker or creature with mana value 3 or less. This will kill the Toadstool Admirer. The ward will still trigger. Do not pay the ward. This spell can't be countered. And because of the wording on the ward ability, counter it unless that player pays the ward cost. You do not have to pay the ward. So this will still kill the Toadstool Admirer, even though the ward was triggered. Just decline the ward cost. I know in Paper Magic, you'd be like, oh, just kill it, you know, and it's fine. But it is a little more confusing in Magic Arena because they do have a prompt for it, and you can still pay the ward or decline. Always, if you're playing using a card that can't be countered, remember to decline. It's so easy to misclick. I just wanted to put that out there because I have seen people do that as well, and it is disheartening because it's like, oh man, they could have won the game, you know? Like it's one of those where it's like you might win the game if somebody makes that mistake, and it doesn't feel good because it's like, well, I should have lost, right? Like, so yeah, I feel like that should be noted. So yeah, if there's something that can't be countered, remember to not pay the ward cost. It will still prompt you. That is confusing because it's like, oh well, wait, the ward is still triggering. Yes, the ward still triggers, but you don't have to pay it because the spell can't be countered. Ward will not physically counter that card because it just can't be countered. So just remember that you don't have to pay that ward even if the prompt comes up on a spell that can't be countered, unless there's some other effect that comes out after this video that like says like those spells can be countered, you know, like I don't know, but like as of right now, like just the base abilities, ward does not counter the long goodbye or any other card that says this spell can't be countered. Ward will not counter it. So just putting that out there. Another thing I want to go over is countering a triggered ability. I'll use Defabricate as an example. The site, you could choose one. It's 1 in a blue. Choose one, counter target activated or triggered ability. Why would you want to do this? I'm just letting you know that you can do it. You wouldn't want to do it on something with ward 2. Like I said, ward stacks. So you can counter one of them, but you're not going to counter all of them because if, let's say the Toadstool Admirer, once again, has the Sheltered by Ghost, it's 2 separate instances of ward 2. So ward 2 will trigger and then another ward 2 will trigger. You can pay the cost to counter it, to counter the ward ability, but then you still have the second ward ability. I guess if something had like ward 4, like the Tyrannix Rex, I guess this would be okay. You could just pay 2 and that'd be fine. Maybe that's important in some instances. Generally, don't try to counter a triggered ability like ward because it is like a bunch of separate instances of ward, but I did want to point out that you can do it. It is a triggered ability, so anything that counters triggered abilities will, you know, attempt to counter it. So I did want to put that out there, even though it's not always, and usually not the best way to spend these cards. But I think we've come to the end of the video. I think that's everything that you need to know about ward. If there is something I missed, if you're a veteran player and you're watching and you're like, wait, you missed this, please put it in the comments. I really want, maybe there's something I just don't know, but let me know in the comments if I left anything out about ward. And thank you so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps these videos. If you want more of these videos, please like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We do videos 4 times a week: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, and sometimes Wednesdays. Wednesday's kind of like an off day, but sometimes we do 5 videos a week, usually in the middle of like a standard meta. And then usually towards the beginning, we'll kind of tone it down a little bit because we We have to we have to build up cards to get to make new decks. So we might not have a whole lot of videos in the beginning of a standard, but Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are our normal days to make videos. So if you enjoyed this, keep it right here. We'll do more. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Peace out and have a wonderful day.